Hi, welcome to Cryptid Wilderness Research. I am CWR team member Daniel Becker here in Anchorage, Alaska. And joining me, as always, my fellow host in Quincy, Washington, Matt Slater.
Hello.
Joining us today, researcher, professor, and author, Andrea Billups from the great state of North Carolina. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey guys, so glad to see you. Really appreciate being on with you today.
Thank you. Andrea, tell us how you got started in this whole world of cryptozoology. How did you get into this field of study?
Well, when I say that I didn't go looking for Bigfoot, Bigfoot found me, that's a really true story for me. Probably like it is for a lot of people. I'll wind it backwards just a little bit and say that in 2009, my partner, Steve, and I purchased a home in Michigan, mid-central Michigan. And it's notable, the sort of locale and the style of this home, because it sort of plays into a story. But we bought this builder home that was situated on the edge of a forest, a large trail system and greenway and wetlands. The house in the back of it was a two-story house, very modern construction, and the whole back of my class, floor-to-ceiling glass windows.
Wow.
So the back of my house opened up onto this beautiful forest system, kind of to the left, and then straight back into a wetland system. So there was lots of woods around me, and no one could build around me. And I soon would discover that there is a large trail system that was connected not very far from my house. And I would walk that trail system almost all the time. And at that time, I had read, like everyone else, about the Patterson-Gimlin film and about Bigfooting, and I found that intriguing, but at no point did I ever think that I would be a part of this world. And usually when I do these kinds of talks, whenever I speak or do a podcast, I always say, I am a literal person. Most of my career has been in journalism. Facts matter, and I'm not going looking for a paranormal experience at all, although I don't discount that. That's not where my mind is, and I had never gone down kind of a rabbit hole. So fast forward, I would walk this trail system. I discovered it for exercise several times a week. And, I could get lost out there. I'm literally walk for miles. And at first, I did get lost out there. But it's quite beautiful. It's terrained. It goes up and down. It's kind of rolling. I wouldn't call them hills. I grew up in West Virginia. Those are hills. But the terrain system was really beautiful. And it had, lots of mature hardwoods, pine, marshes, and it's just a great place for solitude. My job was sometimes stressful, and walking out there was really just a balm for me. And I never was afraid. I always walked alone. And I've always told people who ask me, why do you think what happened to you happened? And I have to say that one reason is because I was consistently predictable, right?
Yeah.
I did the same thing over and over again. I just walked and was oblivious. I was just taking in nature. So fast forward, in 2014, I had been going out there to this area of the forest that for a long time really scared me. There was an area of this woods that just provoked a really visceral reaction. I would walk across this long marsh and go up a hill, and it felt like the energy shifted. And what was notable was that this was a place where there is really dense pine forest stand, where things are old growth and they get packed and it gets really dark because of that. So the trail went in many different directions. You could go in lots of ways. But I would never walk back into this area because it made me uneasy. And I'm a big fan of just paying attention to how something makes you feel, right? more so even now. But I would joke to my friends, I would say, that's the enchanted forest, and never shall I walk back in there. And finally, one day I said, you're being stupid. Just see what's out there. So I did. And I found this really beautiful kind of open area that was almost like an amphitheater. And in the middle of it was a really large tree that had been hit by lightning. And the top of it had been blown off. And it looked like a tree. It looked like an angel. So the tree's limbs were out this way and then up this way. And I started to call it my angel tree, right? For lack of a better word. And it was so pretty, and it felt very reverential there. And I would take my Bible. I had a little pocket New Testament, and I would go and I would sit in front of my tree, and there were all these pine needles there. It was really pretty, and the tree kind of went up on a rise, and I'd just sit there and kind of meditate and pray and just take a moment. And I do it all the time. It's just my really good place. I used to joke with Steve. I'm like, now when I die, I want you to bring me out here and bury me. And he said, I think that's against the law. But I'm like, well, I still think you should go for it. But this old tree was so pretty, and it was hit by lightning. And there's just something about it that spoke to me. So I need to sort of back up and qualify too that, our bedroom in our house was downstairs, and our living area, kitchen, and then just great room were all upstairs. And so because we were so kind of isolated there in the woods, although we did have blinds, we really left them open. We would wake up in the morning and there'd be 5 deer staring at us, or wild turkey or whatever, passing through the neighborhood. Nice. I mean, we were really looking into the woods, and we had this giant lab, a black lab. Her name was Susie, and she loved it out there. And I should say too that I wasn't paying attention to things that were going on around me, that after my sighting, I sort of realized that something was trying to get my attention, but I wasn't attuned to this world. I just didn't totally understand, and I'll walk that back in a second. So back to my tree. One day in late spring, I went out there. It was late morning, and I did my thing. I sat down and I meditated, and I felt watched. People talk about that all the time, and that I felt watched. And it kind of, I blew it off at first, and then the hair on the back of my neck stood up. You could feel that, you get that weird feeling, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's time that I go. And then I said in my mind, not out loud because there was nobody else out there, I said, if you're out there, show yourself. I just said it like that. And no one showed themselves. And so I got up and I turned to the right to go back sort of down the hill. It sloped down to the trail. There's a marked trail. And I was probably about 1.5 miles from the trailhead. I was alone. And I took maybe 5 steps down towards the trail. And for some reason, I turned and I looked back over my left shoulder. And what I saw was this. I saw something that I think was standing. It was red, auburn, and that color really stands out because what was around it were like scrub pines, and they were green. And so the red color will always stand out for me. And this thing, I think, had been watching me the whole time. And it hit the ground. It moved from an upright position. And what I remember, and it was fast. When people say moving like a jet train, like a jet, it was so fast, but it appeared to go down on all fours, I'm going to guess. And what I recall is this arm coming up and over, because I saw like hair being propelled by the movement, right? Like hair, this long being propelled. And this thing went over the embankment. And what happened, the geography there is that you come down to the trail and it circles back around, and then it enters kind of an embankment area that maybe drops 5-6 feet where the trail goes between those embankments. There's a hill up here and there's a hill down here. Well, whatever I looked at went over that embankment. And it was weird because it was quiet. There was not cracking, breaking, or anything. It's just like this thing doubled down and went away. And I stood there like, I'm pretty sure I probably gasped, but I was like, what did I see? What did I see? What was that? And, you always wonder what you're going to do in that moment, right? So here's what I did. I took the steps down to the trail and I started to walk toward it. And maybe I took a few more steps and then it hit me. I am alone. I do not have a sidearm with me. I have the Bible. I guess that's the greatest arm of all time. But I am a mile and a half away from a trailhead and there is no one around. And what did I just see? And then, I thought to myself, did I see Bigfoot? Right? What could this have been? And there are moments I think where your brain goes, was that a flying squirrel, a fox? And then I'm like, no, it was big. It was big. And then I was like, where is it?
Yeah.
And then fight or flight just dug in. And I am not a runner, but I ran. I turned around and I took off running as fast as I could on that trail. And I ran back out of the enchanted forest, over the marsh, across and up another hill, till I was so panic stricken that I had to sit down on a log. And I did. I stopped because I had to catch my breath. And then I was in just sheer running for your life kind of mode. Just I can't explain, just out of control emotion, couldn't breathe. And the strangest thing happened maybe 30 seconds after I sat down to try to assess myself a little bit. I looked across the woods, and where I was at that time, the woods pitched up. And this area was a lot of mature hardwood, no more pine stand. It's a different area. And what I saw was this. A log came out of the top of a tree, really high tree. And what is really notable for me is that it came out of the tree horizontal, like not tumbling end over end. It almost looked like something had set it out, and it is falling like this, like horizontal, and it hit the ground like a cannon. I mean, the hollowness of being in the woods at this time, it just sounded like a gunshot type cannon. And I stood up and my only thought was, oh my God, is this thing following me? Is something following me? Are its friends following me? And I took off running, and I ran all the way, not only to the trailhead, but back to my house. And I remember I sat down on my porch outside and I was like, what just happened? And I just was living in that headspace like, holy crap. I mean, I don't know how else to tell this story other than I saw something out there and I didn't understand it. So I came in and I didn't know who to tell because everybody in my world had no grounding in this world, not at that point. Now I must know 1,000 people all over the world who are involved in this. But at that point, so I'm a journalist. I'll fast forward. I'm probably telling a too long story, and I hope it's interesting.
No, it's fascinating. Continue.
So I get on my computer, and safety for me is having good information.
Yeah.
So I go doing the dumpster dive that all of us probably have done. I'm like, what could I have possibly seen? What do we know about Bigfoot? What do I know about Bigfoot in Michigan? Am I insane to think that's what I saw? Because I've never seen anything like that in my life, and to be honest, I didn't get a great look. It happened so fast. People say, what did its face look like? And I'm like, I have no idea. I I saw the side of it, is what I think. I saw the side of it drop down on all fours, I think, and go over an embankment like a monkey. I mean, just boom, boom. And it was gone. But I read and I read and I read, and I had to, conclude that I saw Bigfoot. So, being in journalism, you lose your fear of talking to people. So I just started reaching out to people across America who were into this phenomenon, people who were fairly well known, invested in this, and asking them questions, and sort of just having these quiet, private conversations with people. And, to my great delight, people were very nice to me, and they listened and were kind and sort of put me onto some things to read. And I was reading everything from, hominid anthropology, scientific journal articles to just everything that I could get my hands on. And that is how I started. But once I got better information, I started putting some weird things together. And here's the weird things. So I mentioned we had a back porch that ran the length of our home, and our whole house sits there in its glass. Well, for a long time, little things had been left there on the corner of my porch. Pieces of metal, old, like little matchbox cars, plastic toys. Maybe the weirdest thing that was ever left there was like someone had rolled up a leaf, and inside of it were mouse parts, just left on the side of my porch. One time I came home from walking in the woods, and there was a maple leaf, like a green maple leaf that was large, right? And it had been stuffed in the handle of my bedroom door, just placed there. And it would have been impossible for that to have fallen like that, because the upstairs, there's an upstairs porch above this downstairs porch, and it sat back about 6 feet. So the chances of something blowing down exactly there, it just didn't feel right. And I mean, it kind of unnerved me, because I'm like, did something put this there? Because it almost feels like it's some kind of sign or some kind of acknowledgement.
Yeah.
So I told you that we had a dog, a black lab, real big black lab. And she was a rescue, and she had all kinds of quirks, including she had idiopathic epilepsy. And she took a lot of medications that sort of worked on her central nervous system. And she had a strange gait. If she would run, sometimes her legs would drop off in the back underneath her. It was due in part to some of her medication. And she was just a very quirky dog. But we had noticed weirdness, and that at night we would let her out for a final walk. And she wouldn't go very far, but she would stand on the end of the porch downstairs, and like she was just staring at something. I mean, stand just still. She did not bark or wolf. She just stood there, almost like she was connecting with something, and to the point where Steve said, "What is she looking at?" And I'm like, I don't know. But I have come to believe, through some conversations I've had, about maybe 60 feet behind our house was an overflow trench, like where these wetlands, if they would flood, they would water, or if it would rain, water would flow back there. So it was about 4.5 feet deep, right? What I do believe is that the people who lived in that forest were coming in and going into that little ditch and watching us. We were just like a terrarium, and because there were no street lights or anything back there, they could move and you could crawl there. I could get down and crawl there and you wouldn't see me. But I think that's what the dog was watching. And, as weird as this sounds, the dog would sometimes just disappear off the back porch, and she'd be gone for like 10 minutes. And then she'd come back, and she would be just really happy, like completely mellow, like nothing was going on. And I have believed that those Sasquatch were back there, and they had watched her all along, and they had called her back there, and they would pet her, or they would connect with her or something, because she was never afraid, and she didn't bark at them or anything. But I have to think that she was communicating with something back there. And so that's sort of what sort of launched me into this. And then after I sort of did the math about what might be happening to me, I started to pay attention in the woods. And it was a while before I went back out there, and people said, "Did you go by yourself?" And I'm like, every stinking time. I went back out there by myself. And now I did develop a friendship with a couple of really fine gentlemen who are both experiencers and researchers there in Michigan, Tim and Jim. And they're the only people I ever really took into my woods. Mainly because I got kind of protective over them. Like, I never made a report or anything, because I just didn't want people trying to tromp through my woods. And I kind of wanted to have a better understanding. But as that evolved, I started to see the things, the sign, the teepee structures, just all of the things that you might imagine. One time in the woods, and please stop me if I'm going too long, but one time I went back out to my angel tree area, and a storm had come, and a big tree had fallen, and it was on its side, sort of like a giant skeleton. And the next day I came back, and there must have been 60 pieces of wood that had been piled and hung around this fallen tree that looked like a structure. And I'm like, holy shit, someone is building out there. And it had an opening, and it was so tall. I'm 5'3", and I could walk in it. And I did walk in it. I probably shouldn't have. I walked in it, and I was like, who made this? And I'm like, the Boy Scouts? I don't know. I mean, I took a picture of it, and I posted it on my Facebook page. And immediately people sent me private messages. They're like, someone is building in this space. You have to know that. I see what I see. And these were all broken limbs. They were not sawed or carved limbs, and they were big and small and all tucked in places and spaces. It was like bushcraft, but kind of like really unwieldy bushcraft, right? And so those things continued to happen to me in the woods. The knocks, the people talk about predator plasma, like seeing kind of things moving. Well, that happened to me too. My friend Jim was out there with me one night. We would go out and night sit there, and sure enough, I'm like, what are we looking at? It just looks like something that's floating. So we saw that, orbs. And then one time, a really strange thing happened to me. I was out there alone at dusk, and there's a bench that kind of is in the middle of a deck that kind of crosses the marsh, and I would sit there and watch the sunset. I would always take pictures of it, and something spoke to me. It spoke to me in a mechanical voice. It just sounded highly mechanical, and it said hello. It sounded like a machine. And I turned around, and the bushes were kind of moving, and I was like, okay, that's creepy. And I went flying back out of the woods again, because I was just like, could it have been a person? Sure. I mean, it could have. It just was so odd. And there were just a litany of odd experiences out there. Twice we found trackways in the snow. It would snow pretty good out there. And, these are the trackways to nowhere, right? You're going to see 10 steps, like a 4 foot, 5 foot stride almost, big stride. And then they come up over a hill, they cross a trail, they go up the trail, and then dead, nothing. And, we took pictures. One of them had a foot anomaly, a toe anomaly, kind of. And it's so weird to find those things. You hear about them, and then you find them. And every time that I would in my brain say, this isn't really happening. A lot of the stuff you're imagining, you're connecting the dots and this isn't real. Something else would happen and I would be like, maybe it is real. And, the noises, all of it, the wood knocks, the whoops. I was there alone. My Steve is a journalist and an author, and he would travel and, awakened in the middle of the night. What sounded like a war party, like things whooping in unison, right? I mean, that really is unnerving. And not enough. I am an apocalyptic sleeper. A house caught on fire about three doors down from where we lived, and I didn't wake up.
Yeah.
And there were, units from multiple jurisdictions who were there for this house fire. Nothing. I slept through it. But I was awakened by a whooping kind of incident, and not far outside my door that was just entirely shattering. The kind of thing that you wake up at 4 a.m. and you sit there with your knees to your chest, afraid to get up because you just don't, you're like, it felt like a bad Bigfoot movie. And so all those things in total went on the entirety of living there until we sold this house in 2018. And to be honest with you, and I'm going to stop right here and let you all jump in, but ever since then, I've had experiences and I've lived in several places. And it feels like, to me, and this is a weird thing to say, but once they know that somehow they will make themselves present to you wherever you go. I live in North Carolina. The woods are about 12 feet from my back deck. And weirdness has continued here in similar ways. So I'll just stop right there.
So in Michigan, after you had this absolutely amazing experience, did you also experience, some people talk about Sasquatch coming up and banging on the sides of their homes and slapping the sides of the house? Did you ever experience any of that?
No, I don't think, no, nothing slapping the side of the house. No. Mm-mm. I suppose that could have happened. I just don't have strong recollections of that.
Did you suspect that there might have been a family or a clan in that area?
Yeah, I know that there's a clan in that area. So how to get into this? So I had mentioned my friends Tim and Jim, who had similar experiences. Tim has a hunting camp in northern Michigan. He had an incident with a deer, I think at 1986 or so, and it really shattered him. He had been hunting, and he knew that they were on his property. And then our friend Jim, who also lived in Michigan, had a Class A kind of wild thing with his son, and so they kind of were my mentors, right? They connect me to a friend of Tim's named Robin, and Tim always said, you should talk to Robin about what's going on in your woods. She's very intuitive. She's a very gifted person. She works with people to sort out these things. And at first I was like, I'm not going to call somebody like that. That's just, nah, that's probably not my thing. Bigfoot psychic, Bigfoot whisperer. I don't know. And as things progressed over time back then, Tim just encouraged me. He goes, just call her. He's like, she's very nice. She won't judge you. And, maybe she'll help you talk through this. So one night I just did. I called her, and she couldn't have been nicer. She said, so I'm going to tell you something, and you don't have to take it for face value. It might sound weird to you, and that's okay. I'm just going to tell you what I think is going on out there. So she says, I think you have a clan of Sasquatch who live in those woods. And in that clan, she said, I think that there is a young girl, and she named her. And she said, she follows you around the woods, and she says she likes your blonde hair. And I was like,
Wow.
that's creepy. I'm like, okay. Or so she likes my blonde hair. And Robin said this. She goes, she wants you to know that she loves your red rocking chair. And I said, I have no idea what that means. I don't have a red rocking chair. And she's like, I understand. She goes, sometimes they just tell me things, and you can take it for what you want or think about it, blah, 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 blah. So I was like, okay. And I listened to her, and she talked some more about, she identified members of this clan and explained that this was a territory that they had passed through. And I just kind of took it with a grain of salt, because what did I know? But then after the thing, maybe one of the most shattering moments of my journey was, so downstairs next to our bedroom was my home office, and it was a very long, narrow room, right? But it had a floor to ceiling window, and no one was ever down there. And it just was my private office. Anyways, I walked in there, and at the back of that room, under it, like some clear plastic, is a red antique rocking chair. It was given to me by my Steve's mother. It was a family heirloom. It didn't match anything else that we had, and I had kept it out of, reverence to her. And I had kind of covered it up because it was covered in red velveteen, like antique looking.
Yeah.
And it was the weirdness is it was kept at the very back of the room, so it wasn't being used or what have you. And all I can conclude is that if someone were to know that rocking chair was in my office, they would have had to come up and press their face to that glass window and look all the way back in there. Now, at that point, Robin, I wasn't her Facebook friend. I wasn't her anything. I didn't know anything about her. So for somebody to say that, such a random thing to say to somebody, it was hard to believe. But when I saw that chair, I was like, oh God, because was something coming up and following me and looking in my house, because the windows were always open. And I don't know what to say about it. But so yeah, I believe that just based on a lot of things, that there were a clan of Sasquatch that at least traveled through there, used that. Since we moved, I have gone back there every Christmas holiday and done a walkabout. And that's how I've seen that's where we found these trackways, right? I typically dismiss, I'm like, they're no longer back there. I don't think they're back there. And then I'll find things, lots of sign and what have you. I'm like, maybe so. I should have said in the beginning that the forest where I was in, at the very back end of it, there's a power line grid, the greenway that kind of just goes and goes and goes and goes for miles. And you read a lot of stories about Sasquatch traveling along those grids,
Right.
But we definitely had that on that property. So yeah, that sort of opened my eyes and maybe gave me some perspective that I wasn't dealing with just one thing. I was dealing with several. So it sounds so weird to share those stories. Honestly, I feel strange talking about them because it's just so odd. And but that's what happened to me.
That is amazing. And of course, Robin, we love Robin. Robin is one of our partners, and we've got nothing but great things to say about her. We love talking to her. She's a great lady. Yes. So you've established this connection with this Sasquatch clan. And did you ever experience mind speak? And you mentioned the one instance there, but tell us about how mind speak started coming into this, and how you responded, and how you dealt with it?
So yeah, this is so odd to talk about too. So, I continued back then to just stay in the woods. Somehow I sort of bypassed my fear and would go out there. I almost sort of developed in my brain, I'm like, so these people live in my forest and they've never tried to hurt me? Never done anything to me. I mean, we've had things thrown, and trees downed and twigs snapped and those kinds of behaviors, But Robin had named this girl Sasquatch. She said she was very young, and she gave her name. Her name was Radina, and so I would walk out there and I would just talk to myself. I'm like, Radina, if you are a real thing and you are out there, make yourself known to me. This is very strange to me. I don't know if you communicate with me, but show me who you are. And she just began to talk to me. She sounded like a young thing. She didn't sound like an animal.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this is what I hear in my mind. It's not like I'm standing here viscerally hearing voices. It is just like something is communicating back to me.
Right.
And so from time to time, like I would go out in the woods and I would look around and I wouldn't be seeing anything. And she would say things to like, they're all here. You're just not paying attention. Or she would say, look around. And sometimes she would say, go ahead and take a picture. You're going to see what you're going to see. And, it was like almost like she was calculating my disbelief, and sort of coming back to me to say, you're wrong. But over time, I mean, she would tell me things like she's always around and that she would always be around and that she was accessible to me and that she would come around and I might never see her, but she would always be close and she should know that. Sometimes there have been situations where she would say, she goes, they know you're there and you're protected. Don't worry. And I have to say that I have, since I lived in Michigan, I lived in Florida, and then I lived in Kentucky, and then I moved back to West Virginia, and now I am in North Carolina again. I have made a series of moves over the last 7 or 8 years, and really quick moves related to work. And that relationship that I've been sharing with you has continued. It still continues. And
That's fantastic.
And it's not something that I go around talking to people about.
Sure.
I will share it because it is true for me. It's my truth, but I don't really know where to put it. All I know is that there's been no negative interactions with her or anything in that Michigan woods. It's almost like they know who I am. I think they know who Jim and Tim are. They also know that we come as friends. I don't take firearms into the woods out there. Probably I should take something, but I just don't, I'm always coming in harmless. And I try not to judge my experience and just accept it. But yeah, so that's sort of that was the beginning of Mind Speak. But Radina's not the only person who's ever talked to me, right? So I'll share this story, and this is something I really don't talk about a lot, and that is that I was working and teaching at Western Kentucky University, a great school, and as professor, and I had connected with a group, a community of Bigfoot friends in Kentucky. Kentucky's very squatchy, and really nice people who'd been down there for a long time, and we would do the thing. I would drive from my home up into Mammoth Caves. I don't know, the national park there, Mammoth Caves, if you have ever been.
Right.
That's a very mystical, active, unusual place. You have all the caves that are there, and just it's unusual. Its vibration to me is very unusual. So I meet some people up there. We would do crazy things like meet at midnight, and we would go in places and spaces that were hard to reach, and just sit out and do our thing. And that was very scary. But one night I was driving, and it's a very windy road to come up into that park, from where I was coming. And it was dark, and I was alone, 2-lane roads, just uh, beginning of a missing 411 episode. And
Right.
I was afraid. I just was afraid. And something spoke to me in a very large and imperious voice, who said he was the leader of the clan of Mammoth. That's how he said he was. That's who he introduced himself. And he told me his name.
Wow.
And I was like, that's so bizarre. And he's like, you are welcome here, and you are protected here. And I didn't know what to say. I mean, I didn't have anyone to say anything to. I was by myself driving up there. And it's just memorable to me. It's almost like he intercepted my fear, and he knew that I had been coming and going out of that park for a while, exploring in the daytime and at night, just looking around. It's just so vast. And but yeah, that happened to me. And this person who spoke to me there, he is like the lead character in a book that I wrote that was published in June. So his name is Agad, and that is how he introduced himself. He is Agad. And yeah, I know that sounds stranger than strange.
That is an absolutely amazing story and experience that you've shared. Speaking of the book, why don't we talk about the book?
Sure. So, for a long time, because I'm a writer and that's my natural skill, and it's easy for me to do that, right? I said, I'm going to write a memoir about what has happened to me. It's so strange. I just want to put this down. I never try to write books really with the consideration that I'm writing for other people. Really, I'm just writing for me. And so I wanted to get this down, and I wrote 5 or 6 chapters into this book, and then I reread it over and over, and said, this is crazy, right? I sound like a nut. People would think I'm insane. To put that out there is just gonna, layer on what already feels very strange to share. So about a year and a half ago, I just got the idea that I was going to share some of my thoughts and feelings about Bigfoot in a book that was written for young readers, right? And so I wrote this little book. It's kind of in 3 little mini stories that are carried throughout this book under one cover, called Good in the Woods. And it is about a young girl who went on a school field trip in the Pacific Northwest. And I haven't really talked about any of my experiences out in the Pacific Northwest, but I have done some pretty gnarly camping and researching out in Oregon and Washington State, where you live, Matt. And I've had some insanity experiences out there that really have confirmed everything for me, including another visual. But this book is about this little girl who's on a school field trip. She is hiking in the Olympic National Forest, and she gets separated from her school group, and she gets lost. And if you've ever been out there, you know how easy that might be if you're 9 years old. And she starts to try to hunt for her group, climbs to the top of a hill, loses her balance and falls with a backpack on, and tumbles and knocks herself out. and she wakes up and she immediately hears something eating, like really loudly. And she looks across the way, and sitting in front of her is a giant monster. That's what she calls it in the beginning. And this monster begins to speak to her. And he tells her, he goes, "Your mom was right. These are delicious." And in the beginning of the book, her mother had joked with her that she was packing some berries in her lunchbox. And her mother had given her an old lunchbox that had Bigfoot on it. And the little girl, her name is Jamie Lucy, she says, "Mama, is Bigfoot real?" And her mom said, "Sure he is, honey." And so she packed the berries in her lunchbox and said, "Bigfoot's going to love him." So she wakes up and she sees this thing across the way who has gotten in her backpack and into her food. And he's eating those berries. And he says, "Your mom was right. They're delicious." And he proceeds to befriend her. And that's sort of the story that carries on through this. He explains to her what he is, and he explains to her what his people are about. But I think, the thing I want to share here is that there's so much awfulness in this world, and there's so many messages that children are being exposed to, that I tried to sort of evoke some universal kind of value themes in the book. Because, Bigfoot tells her that, I might look weird to you and different and big and like a monster, but to other people, I look good. We look good to our people. And, he says in a very kind way that, people don't all have to be alike to like one another. And to me, that's kind of a very, something that's on my heart in this era. And the Bigfoot shares lots of other things. He tells her later in the story where she's having trouble with her family, and she's very young and feeling very alone. He tells her that she's never alone, that the great creator is always looking out for her, and she would never be alone. And so I just tried to lace the book with some good value kind of themes, that you must always have faith in yourself and in the creator. And hoping that's important to me as a person outside of Bigfoot world. And I just sort of use this children's story to kind of encapsulate some beliefs. There is mind speak in the book. There are crazy things like orbs and all of the kind of Bigfoot oddities, but they're shared in a pretty gentle way. Like, it's not terribly fanciful, but to suffice it to say that the Bigfoot Agad befriends Jamie Lucy. He never leaves her, much like I feel that these things have never left me. The first night that we lived in this really large townhouse where I live, somehow I managed to move and live near the forest. By accident, I found this place. And my Steve doesn't like air conditioning a lot, so he put the windows up. First night we stayed here, and you know how it is when you move, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And so he falls right asleep, and I'm laying there wide awake, being really tired, and it's late at night, and what do I hear with those windows open? Whack, whack. And I'm like, I feel like I'm being punked, right? I'm like, no. And then what I don't realize is that behind where I live are miles of trails and walking space, just like where I lived in Michigan. And I'm living near the woods. And, was that some sort of weird confirmation for me? I don't know, but it just cracked me up. And I was like, I'll be damned. I'm like, hello again, everyone. I'm back. And I guess you are too. And that sounds like a stupid thing to say. In a way, I'm joking about it. But it just, things like this continue. And I have had episodes almost everywhere Steve and I have gone to hike in West Virginia and had a daytime incident. And it just kind of, it feels like that they're just never far away, that somehow if they know that you know and that you're friendly, right? That they all know. And that again sounds nuts. It just begs all kinds of things. But I do think that, I'll just say on the record that I think these things are terribly sentient, really wise and smart, and have some capacities that we don't fully get. And I do think that they have capacity to get inside of people's heads. And I don't know what that means, but I think we're dealing with something far, far beyond just, a primate, Gigantopithecus, or wherever something might live on that, anthropological spectrum.
Yeah.
I think we're dealing with something really different. And I'm not a crazy person. I'm not naturally telepathic. I don't believe I have gifts. I believe I'm empathic. But this continues to happen to me and for me. And I think maybe the greatest gift of it is that I've met so many really smart people all over the country, right? People who do fascinating things. And I have grown as a person. Like, I have done some camping out in the Pacific Northwest. Well, I call it free camping, but no lights, no tents, no fires.
Yeah.
Meaning I'm sleeping out in the woods. And that's paralyzingly scary at first to try to do those things. But
Definitely.
it's 10 years ago, I was like, I'm never camping. I hate the woods. I hate to be dirty. I don't even, I don't own a tent. I don't own hiking boots. I don't own any of these things. And now I feel pretty at home. It's like I do go out a lot by myself. Maybe I shouldn't, but I am firearm trained. But I still go out and I still have some interactions, and it still fascinates me. I'm just not entirely sure what I'm dealing with, but I've come to believe that it's beyond the scope of an ape in the woods, but by far.
Now, something I want to say about the book before I toss the ball over to Matt up there in Quincy, Washington. We think it's absolutely fantastic that you geared this book towards young readers, because these young readers are the researchers of tomorrow. And we think that's just wonderful, because I haven't heard of very many books that are geared towards young readers about this topic. So thumbs up. What a great idea and concept.
I would say too that the book is not written for childish readers. Like, you as an adult could read this book and not feel like I was writing it dumbed down. It's not written in that way. It's
Great.
simple story, but it's a book that I think someone reviewed the book and said that I didn't pander to kids. I wrote kind of as a grown-up to kids, but in a non-threatening way. So
Excellent.
I went out and spoke to some people who filed a report to the website 16 miles from me. It was a sighting with a father and a daughter that were about 3 weeks apart. And they lived in a beautiful home. He's retired military. And their property sort of about 22 acres, I think, that sort of abutted the Eno River here. And they both saw the same thing that came up and was basically watching these little kids. There were 3 children, 2 boys that played basketball out on a big padded, driveway. And, this was a very grand house that had been built on a big property spread. And a daughter first saw this in the late afternoon and was paralyzed. Her parents were gone. And then the dad said, you didn't see Bigfoot, you saw a bear. She's like, that was not a bear. She said this thing stood up as high as a basketball hoop and was standing behind it. So the parents come home, and maybe a few weeks later, the dad goes out in the evening, and this thing stands up from behind a root ball in the same pretty general vicinity of where the daughter had seen the sighting. And again, that was 16 miles from me. But you could see, he said the thing, it got up and it turned around and just walked gently away and back over the embankment and down and down and down away, didn't make a sound. But he saw the entire back of it, right? This is North Carolina and very close to me. And I think that it was using the river to travel, and it had this, there were lots of deer on this property. You know, they hunted this property, and these little boys would come out there and scream and yell and do what little boys do and played at the basketball thing, and they were interesting, right?
Yeah.
That's why I say I think they're super curious of people and very stealthy, and are just around people. I might not have even known what was going on my back porch if I hadn't had that sighting. Like I thought it was weird. Like maybe people were hiking in the woods and finding little things and just leaving them for me, but I would never have connected the dots. And I'm pretty sure that's probably going on in a lot of places. And I think too, you know, there are people out there who know what's on their property and don't want anything to do with it and don't want to talk about it.
True.
You know, they've known for a long, long time that they're not alone out there. And, you know, what we see reported to databases and what have you is the tip of the iceberg of what is reported. And a lot of people, I think, are like me in that they don't want to talk about it publicly because it sounds crazy. And to share that information now that I'm sort of out of the closet in the Bigfoot world in a way, it still feels crazy. I still feel like I have to walk it back because I'm like, I'm a normal person. I'm just a girl. I did not go looking for Bigfoot. Bigfoot found me. And I'm not making up this story because believe me, it hasn't helped me in any way to even talk about it. I think I talk about it psychologically. It helps me process it because if I think about the day that I had that first sighting, I can hear my voice start to rise and I could sort of feel visceral, just reaction to it. You know, like I'm clawing myself right now. It gets under your skin. You're like, it's shocking. It's still just, I defy anybody to say, oh yeah, I saw Bigfoot. I'm like, no, if you have a sighting, it will stay with you and shock the crap out of you. And it will cause you to reflect on everything else. You know, people say my paradigm was shifted. And I'm like, you're damn straight it's been shifted. I mean, I walked many years in this world, you know, believing that Bigfoot was something that somebody made up. And now I'm 100% sure that it is certainly not made up, and it's walking around us. And I'm not sure what it is, but yeah.
So I have to ask this question. Given your extensive experience in academics at the university level as a professor and in all your experience in that area, how do you see the academic world responding to the topic of cryptozoology nowadays? Over the last 5 years, we've seen the government starting to make more disclosures about UFOs, hold congressional hearings about the topics. And 10 years ago, you know, we would never even be talking about that at the congressional level the way they have been over the last couple of years. Do you see the world of academia opening up a little bit more to cryptozoology, or are they still kind of closed off to it?
So I think that, you know, let's talk about two worlds, the public facing part of academia and the other part of it. You can't tell me that Don Jeffrey Meldrum is the only professor of, you know, anthropology who doesn't know that these things are real. There are people out there. I think that there are a lot of academics who have toyed with this notion and probably live on the deep down low. Probably are all out there having conversations. They're just not having them on Facebook. But I mean, I think that, how could you not be devoted to a life of scientific inquiry and not allow that this is entirely possible? When people say there's no evidence, there is an enormous amount of evidence. I think, for a scientist, you want to collect that evidence and you want to put it all in one kind of ball and then examine it and sort of make conclusions based on your set, your data set, right? I think that I think it will happen. I think that here's what I think will really be the tipping point, and that is that technology is going to evolve to some point where it abets the scientific community, right? When you start seeing people using things like LiDAR and different types of drones, that you see how the technological capacity continues to grow leaps and bounds, right? 15 years ago, you didn't have these things. So those kinds of measuring tools are substantiate things, I would say. They substantiate them, at least scientifically. And I think those are the kind of things that people are looking for. I mean, people poo-poo shows like Expedition Bigfoot, but they are, in a micro sort of way, putting technology to the use in our world, right? They are taking that technology to places and spaces that most scientific researchers might not want to go. I think that technology will evolve an answer for us. Short of somebody dragging a body out of the woods, which I just don't think is going to happen.
Yep.
You might shoot a Bigfoot, but you're not going to drag it out because it probably has friends. and I would be woe to you for doing something like that. But I think technology is going to show us some things, and it's up for the scientific community to rally itself ever more. I love when I hear people like Jane Goodall say that she's absolutely open to the possibility of this happening. And why not? I mean, think about this, gentlemen. We don't even know what's on our ocean floor in lots of places, and it's 2024. Okay.
Yeah.
Our capacity to study that will hinge on technology's ability to lead us there, right? And so if we are still finding species that we've never heard of, why is this not possible? People out there in the civilian world say, well, if Bigfoot were real, why aren't we finding bones? Why haven't we seen anyone? We would find them by now. And I'm like, have you ever been, in the middle of Oregon? Have you ever been to some remote places where you could barely four-wheel drive into them and then hike miles and miles after that where ain't nobody been? Okay, right. There are plenty places to hide and plenty places to be. And if your whole MO is not to be found, the only thing that's going to find you, I think, is technology. Everything breathes. Everyone is energy and mass. Everything living is going to give off a heat signature, I think. So start doing the math and start thinking about where technology lives. You mentioned the government. There is zero doubt in my mind that the government knows that Sasquatch is a real thing. I mean, come on.
I agree. In fact, one time I was speaking to an executive level person from the Bureau of Land Management and spoke to him several times, and I would bring up the topic of Sasquatch, and he would just look away and say, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. But it was pretty evident to me that his silence spoke louder than his words.
Somebody's going to release all these documents, I'm a big fan of transparency. The UFO files, that there are tons of these things. They don't talk about them because they fear mass hysteria, right? Bigfoot is coming out of the woods and he's going to get us and our children. I'm like, I sincerely doubt that, but you know how bad information spreads.
Yes.
And we, you know,
Very true.
without things like a scientific classification and whatever, to put this phenomenon, you know, into a living, breathing space, I guess. How do you talk about it? It's on the evolutionary chain. I mean, where do you put it? Do you name it? You know, like I said, I use the word Gigantopithecus as a part of that, but is it that? Is it a part of that? I mean, time and technology will will this out. And I think that it will give some dignity back to some people who have been dismissed for many years. There are people who know that this is real, and 90% of them aren't even talking about it. Let's just drill that down. You know it. You go out and you have a conversation with people, and then somebody overheard you and said, you know, I had some things to happen to me when I was 12. And I'm like, I bet you did. I bet you did. And, you know, Robin, our friend Robin, has talked about her childhood and knowing that these were on her property and
Yes.
and seeing them. I have no doubt that there are 1,000 Robins who had that experience. You know, I just think that the scientific community, and there are a lot of people in the scientific community who don't, you know, who don't want to be castigated by their peers. But you know, I think an open mind is a really good thing to have. And one of the reasons why I'm talking to you today is because as I get older, I almost am like, I can no longer pretend that this did not happen to me and doesn't continue to happen. It is a very real thing in my life. And as weird or odd or as out of position as it is with my the professional side of my life, I feel like I just have to say it. I mean, I just think I have to get it out there, and people can laugh at me or not believe me. And I mean, as I get older, I just don't care. I mean, I tell people I would sit down for a lie detector test about everything that I've ever said publicly and feel really good about that. And I just roll the dice. It's been a shocking, um, development in a really pretty normal life. You know, there's my life before Bigfoot and there's my life after Bigfoot. And some of my very, you know, civilian friends, I'll call them, don't understand that at all. They're like, that can't be real. You're just making that up. And I'm like, yeah, a part of me is like, maybe I wish it didn't happen to me. But then the other side of it is like, I know the world is so much greater than me. And I know that we spend our lives trying to pretend that we're not open to things that we don't understand. But I feel like there's so many things that we don't understand, right? Faith is blind, and I'd rather have it and die with that than and it not be true than, you know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
I do believe that I believe more people in science are going to embrace this, and that will be because of technology.
Very well stated. Very well stated.
Yes.
What do you got coming up? What do you got coming up in the future here?
So I don't really have any speaking engagements. I'm happy to talk to groups, but I don't go out and court that kind of attention. One is because I have a really kind of busy work life, you know, a lot of work demands. Otherwise, I'd be in the woods every week. I'd be right out there, kind of just embedded in the woods doing that. But I'm open to talking. The last Bigfoot festival I did was in West Virginia a year ago, and that was a good experience. But I always start out and say, at least I did then, I don't have a website, and I'm not trying to sell you anything. But now I have a book, so I guess I am trying to sell you my book, but not aggressively. You know, I'm hoping that people in the Bigfoot community will like my book and buy it for their children and grandchildren, and embrace that it is well written and fun to read. But I have not made myself a Bigfoot personality, although sometimes I feel like I know more than some of them. But here's what I mean genuinely, and that is that all of us have a piece of this puzzle, right? All of this collective knowledge that's going on out there. And the better we are to one another in sharing that and not disparaging that, the greater the community will be unified around the same thing. And that's the answer that we all want. We want to understand what is Bigfoot, and we want to find ways maybe to ensure that it is protected, and that we just have to come together. I see a lot of people who just really want to be personalities in this world, and
Yes.
I don't want to be a personality in this world, but I am willing to try to share any good knowledge that I have. And I'm also willing to get out there in the field and put in the time to do this. We spend so much time where nothing happens. If I could count the hundreds of nights I've been in the woods in the middle of flipping nowhere, and not a single thing happened, and then the 10 nights where, like, holy God, what just happened out here? It's that kind of a ratio, but I still would do it every day because I think it is just so compelling. But I think as I continue to do this, I have a healthy respect to whatever Sasquatch is, but I don't think Sasquatch is trying to hurt me or is some kind of like natural born killer. I think if it's killing, it's to feed itself or to protect its family, but it's not after me. And I have plenty of experiences where something could have taken about 10 steps and smashed me like a bug. That didn't happen. And I have to conclude it's because we're dealing with something that's much more like us than not like us. I'll just say that. What are we dealing with? I'm not quite sure. But I wouldn't dismiss it. I think it's just the greatest fascination. And if we're wrong, so we are. But if we're right, what a beautiful world we're in, right? I mean, wow. This species has been living among us, practically hidden for generations, and it has continued to evolve itself. That's amazing, man. That's the cover of Nat Geo.
That is. Before we close, I want to turn it back over to Matt up there in Quincy, Washington.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your stories with us and with our audience. I know sometimes, reliving the experience can maybe be a little bit difficult. But like you were saying, sharing the information and bringing groups and bringing the community together, that's what we would like to try and do on this channel. And the more information and the experiences that are out there, it helps people understand the different scenarios that can develop. And I just wanted to say thank you for sharing the information today.
Well, it's my pleasure. I thank you for giving people a safe space to talk about this. I think the more that we do that with people, the more people will be willing to share. And that just adds to our body of knowledge, right? I think that's what everybody with a good heart and well-intentioned, that's what we want. We want more people to share. We all have a piece of this puzzle. We do.
Yep.
So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
The name of the book is Good in the Woods, available at Amazon and BarnesandNobles.com. So, author, researcher, professor, experiencer, Andrea Billups, thank you so much for sharing your heart with us today and these amazing experiences. And we definitely encourage our subscribers to buy this book. And again, thank you so much.
Sure. My pleasure. You guys have a great day.
So for myself, Daniel Becker, CWR team member in Anchorage, Alaska, for my fellow host, Matt Slater in Quincy, Washington, and our guest, the wonderful Andrea Billups. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.